of Stevens Point Airport Commission meeting, recorded September 14, 2020.
On to the agenda for the Airport Commission and the approval of the August 10th minutes is the agenda item. Any questions, comments?
I'll move for approval. Ray.
I'll second. Haynes.
Any other changes? Pretty brief report, should be. All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Claims for last month. Questions?
This is Carl. I got a question on 2265. Was that a typical delay in the charges or just back from February?
That's a good question. Mary, do you have any thing to share on that? I do. Okay.
The employees who were doing the work chose to take the overtime hours as comp time, and the party that was doing the billing was actually billing off of the payroll reports, not off of the actual general ledger reports. So when I did an audit, I caught it, and we now look at the GL and the payroll reports.
Good question, Carl. Any others? If not, a motion is in order to approve the Airport Commission claims.
Move to approve.
Second by Haynes.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, Jody, you're back.
All right, thank you very much. So for the airport operating results, as we look at this over the last 5 years, we can see consistently the expenses have outpaced the revenues, but a large portion of that is depreciation expense. So I think two key items to point out with the way this graph pulls together is this is just the operating revenues. It does not include the tax levy revenue that comes from the city that is budgeted and levied each year. So I would say if you look at the deficit there, about 85% of that is due to depreciation expense, which is non-cash. And actually a lot of the capital there has other funding sources. And then the remainder of that gap is covered by the city tax levy that is budgeted consistently from year to year. So when we look at the unrestricted cash reserves of the airport fund, they've been very stable over the last 4 out of the last 5 years at between 8 and 9 months worth of operations on hand. Again, allowing there for if there is a unique project that comes up or something that needs to get paid prior to revenues coming in a good position. And there's no debt outstanding in this fund.
Jody, based on your firm's experience for an airport that is, not used for commercial purposes like the CWA airport in Mosinee, is this expense exceeding the revenues and the effects of depreciation and the city's taxes?
Mm-hmm.
Is typical? It seems a little alarming. I guess I'm trying to be not alarmed.
I think the depreciation not being funded because often there are federal grants or other unique sources when those large capital projects occur. So not having that depreciation fully funded would be normal. Then resulting in a deficit like this, if you just look at it purely from a accrual accounting perspective. As far as the tax funding that comes into the fund, I think there are several airports that have some level of local support like that. And yours has been very consistent from as long as I've been involved with the city's finances. So
To
it-
add to that, you know, it's about 5% local share on the large projects that we need to provide. So, you know, Jody's right on that, in that by not funding depreciation, we're not really losing on capital replacement of assets at all, because the state and federal sources combine to pay for about 95% of the projects related to things like surfaces and that kind of thing. The runways that are coming up, the repaving we just did, and the fence project are all examples of those. Or even beyond that, things like entitlement dollars. What's the other term I'm looking for, Jason, here? Discretionary spending, things like that come into that. And so in addition to that, you add on, we've been right between $150,000 and $155,000 of tax levy support, very constant. So it's kind of an unsettling line. I agree. But you know, at a minimum, we can look at the months on hand of reserves and understand that there's cash there still.
Well, I guess another way to look at it is we all could kind of do a calculation as to how much real estate taxes Century Insurance pays in a year, and I'm sure it's a lot more than $115,000.
It's
Probably.
significant, yeah. And
Yeah,
we do
so-
have we do have a lot of activity out there other than scheduled traffic. You know, we don't have that type of traffic going on, but there's a lot of commercial activity out there.
I mean, the bottom line is if we didn't keep that airport operating, Century would have never built all of the properties they have built over the last 40 years.
It's a gem, that airport, that's for sure.
It sure is. All right, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, so I think, you know, there isn't as much activity here to report on, but I will take note of that this looks a little awkward, and see if we can find a better way to present the results next year.
That would be great. I was
That may
gonna
be a
ask that
fairer
question.
presentation,
Yeah,
or yeah, a clearer presentation.
all right. Is that all you have, Jody?
That's all I have for the airport.
Very good. Thank you for explaining everything today. You did a very good job as usual, so appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much for having me.
Sure. All right, we need a motion to accept the audit for the airport. Motion and a second for the City of Cedar Point Airport Department.
I'll move to accept the report, the audit, Ray.
I'll move to accept. This is Carl.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carried.
Just for
All right.
the sake of clarification, and notes, there are two motions there. We'll do Ray for the motion and Carl for the second, if you guys don't mind.
That's fine.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Resolution and public hearing related to petitioning the state for airport funds. Jason, are you handling this?
Why don't you go ahead? You can explain it a little bit clearer.
Sure. Basically what happened here is that we have now, I think, put in the paper maybe 2 or 3 times the notice that our recurring petition to the state for funds is going to be heard at a public hearing at council. I'd really just look to the fact that on all of our timing here, we've been in a transition with a lot of things, and then the not in-person meetings didn't help. So the first time we put a notice out saying that we're going to have a public hearing petitioning the state for airport funds, I think we're in a transition of our city clerk. And so I think that there was some communication that got lost there to actually put it on the agenda to have the physical public hearing. The second time that it happened and we didn't do the public hearing, I would blame this very format that we're using right now and the fact that I was out of the office as for why it didn't happen. So this is a verbal item to you guys, so that if you see the ad that was in last Friday's Gazette, which is still our official paper, saying that we are petitioning the state, it is once again the same item. We need to have the public hearing. That'll be held next Monday, a week from tonight, at the Common Council meeting. It is very routine. There's nothing unusual about this, but it's a process that we have to go through to say, hey, public, here's what we're asking the state for funds on. Here's the kind of projects that could be funded by those. If you've got something to say, come on out and say it. So that's really what this was, just an FYI, because it has been out there a couple of times and we didn't want there to be any confusion.
Very good. Jason, item number 5, any,
Excuse me, Paul. How much will we be asking the state for?
It's not a set amount, Ray. It's just a set of projects. So like Joel said, a potential group of projects that could happen. So those range from
Okay.
$500,000 to $3 million. And again, this is assuming that we would have our local share allocated through capital and other resources.
Okay, sounds good.
any other questions? Okay. Jason, anything you want to add to your written report?
I guess I'd like to bring the commission's attention to 2 quick items. Our hangar area pavement project, which Joel had mentioned earlier as an example in our audit, was completed and we did the final inspection. We as the sponsor, the consultant and the State Bureau of Aeronautics are all happy with the way the project went, and we will be kind of overviewing the maintenance of this project throughout the next year to just make sure we have a warranty on these payments. So we'll be inspecting them periodically, and I'll keep the commission apprised of any issues that we may run into, but so far so good on that project. And we had on a side note, we had our State 5010 inspection done last month, and it's not really a test, but if it were, we would have passed it with flying colors. So Joel's comment as the airport being a gem, I think would be reflected in our 5010 inspection.
Well, congratulations on that, Jason, and thanks for the additional info. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Move to adjourn, is Carl?
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you for your attendance.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.